This is the story of the $8 trillion mistake. That's T for trillion. And the worst part? It wasn't a bomb, it wasn't a virus, and it wasn't even a mistake made by one single person. It was a fundamental error in math and human trust that almost ended the global economy. And the people who caused it? They walked away rich. We're talking about the time Wall Street decided math was optional and how they convinced everyone from your neighbor to your grandma to buy a rotten sandwich of bad debt. This is the biggest financial mistake in history, and by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how they did it and why it could happen again. Let's go back to the mid-2000s. The dream was simple. Get a house. Wall Street, bless their greedy little hearts, decided they wanted to help a lot. They started giving out loans to literally anyone. If you had a pulse, you got a loan. If you had a pet goldfish, you got a loan. If you were a cardboard cut out of a wealthy person, you got a loan. These were called subprime mortgages. But honestly, I'm sick of the fancy names. They were just bad loans given to people who had no business taking them and no way to pay them back. The logic was simple, but fatally flawed. House prices only go up. That's what they told everyone. Egg Talks guarantees it. Just kidding. Don't trust anyone. Now, why would a bank give out a loan they knew was bad? Because they weren't keeping them. They were selling them off faster than you can say financial deregulation. Imagine you have a sandwich. You take the good bread, the good loans, and then the rotten meat, the bad loans. You put them together, wrap them up, and call it a collateralized debt obligation, or CDO. The banks told everyone, this sandwich is fine, it's diversified. They even hired rating agencies, the guys who grade your homework, to give these rotten sandwiches a AAA rating, the highest grade. Now, how do you convince a rating agency that a sandwich full of rotten meat is actually gourmet cuisine? You pay them a lot. That little AAA stamp was bought and paid for. But here's the biggest mistake, the math error. The rating agencies used a formula that assumed that if one person defaulted on their loan, it wouldn't affect the others. They assumed that a bad loan in Florida had nothing to do with a bad loan in California. They assumed that everyone wouldn't default at the same time. That was the math error. It was like assuming that if one person jumps off a cliff, the others won't follow. The formula was flawed because it ignored one simple truth. Humans are herd animals. When one house price drops, everyone panics. The risk wasn't isolated, it was contagious. And then the inevitable happened. House prices stopped going up, and then they started going down. The people who shouldn't have gotten loans in the first place started defaulting. And because those rotten loans were packaged together in those fancy CDO sandwiches, the entire sandwich turned toxic. The banks who bought these CDOs realized they were holding trillions of dollars worth of garbage. But it gets worse. They had insured these CDOs with something called credit default swaps, basically, gambling on whether the rotten sandwich would go bad. The banks stopped trusting each other. The credit market froze. This wasn't just a housing problem. This was a trust problem. And that, my friends, is how a simple math error in a basement office turned into an $8 trillion global catastrophe. The mistake was made. But the real tragedy is that the system was deemed too big to fail. So the government stepped in using taxpayer money to bail out the very institutions that caused the mess. The bankers walked away rich, and the common man was left with the bill. So, what did we learn from the biggest financial mistake in history? That the most dangerous thing in the world isn't a nuclear missile, it's a banker with a bad math formula and too much confidence. The mistake was made, but the lesson is ours to keep. If you want to keep learning about the biggest mistakes that shaped our world, make sure you subscribe to Egg Talks. Hit the like button and tell me in the comments, what was the biggest financial mistake you or your country ever made? And more importantly, do you think this could happen again? See you in the next video.